power of one. Today, we are going to have a very interesting conversation, and I encourage all viewers to pay close attention. It is time to elect the mayor for the city of Philadelphia. We need help, and we are faced with so many things. So I encourage you to listen to the candidates and vote for the one that you think will make a change in the city of Philadelphia. But I have the pleasure of speaking with Dave today, and he's going to educate us on all of the issues and what he will do to try to make things right in the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation.
You're welcome. Now, let's do Politics 101. I know that you were running for mayor. Let's talk about gun violence first. Gun violence in the city of Philadelphia, it's not new. Some people may think it's new. It's not new. It's just heartbreaking that in the city of Philadelphia, we have almost maybe 300 or over 300 murders a year. What will you do for those most affected, which is the Black and Brown community? What will you do to help stop gun violence in the city of Philadelphia?
Yeah, the thing that I will do is I will enforce the law. That may sound simple, and it is simple, but it hasn't been done. And I'll just explain that, yeah, gun violence is not new in the city, but it comes and goes. It comes and goes like in waves. There's a lot of murders, and then there's less, and then there's more. And sometimes it's a result of what's kind of happening in our city or happening in the world. And other times it's just a policy change in our city. And so to me, having served in the district attorney's office under two different DAs, Ed Rendell and then Ron Castile, I started in 1985 in the district attorney's office. And crime and in particular violent crime, while it does come back and surge, it is different, and it kind of depends on why the violence is there. So, for example, when I was a kid living in Southwest Philadelphia, it was during the gang war years in Philadelphia, pretty much 68 to 72. And there were a lot of murders, and young people in particular were killing each other for no other reason than they lived in a different neighborhood and belonged to a different gang, right? So pretty meaningless violence and murder. But they did not shoot people randomly like they do today, even though I would consider it random because one person belonged to one gang, the other person belonged to another. It was an organization, and so they were kind of combatants and non-combatants. So there were still rules. Later, with the crack epidemic, it was about the drugs, and it was about who was not delivering their payments, and about territories and about money. But today, the violence is so wanton, it's so random. Sometimes really people are getting killed for no other reason than they showed up in someone's social media post. Right. And so when we have young people with semi-automatic weapons with extended magazines, they are littering the place with bullet shells as they look for someone who really did nothing to speak of other than they're a cousin, a brother, or a friend of someone that these people are looking for and can't find. The other part of it is, again, the drugs. We still have a lot of murders still related to drug dealing. And so for me, the first thing I will do is to enforce the law. And that means what most people in the community know already, in particular communities with a lot of violence, they already know who is committing the murders. They know why they're doing it. The people who do it say so publicly. And we can understand, we can intercept those communications. What is a mystery is how is it that everyone in the neighborhood knows that the white Ford and the brown Toyota are out driving around the neighborhood looking to shoot a particular person, and yet there's no intervention by the police? And how come there's no answer to 911? And how come when people want police, they're never around? And so what people need to understand is we have a shortage of police, 1,400 police officers. We have a demoralized police force. And we have a lot of officers that are taking early retirement. They're not sticking around. And if our police do not stick around, it's very hard to recruit. So we need a new mayor. We need a mayor that's going to be very clear about what the job of the police is. What is your job? What are you doing? And so policing has to be made clear to the police and made clear to the community. Policing, particularly community policing, means that the police serve the community. They know who's in the community, and the community is very comfortable working with the police and being policed. That means you have to have knowledgeable police officers who are abiding by the law, restraining themselves, exercising discipline, and being courteous and polite, and working in a common goal to make sure that we're deterring crime and we're making people safe. One of the worst things we could do as a government is let people know that we don't care about them by not providing for their safety and well-being. And so from Philadelphia police patrolling the community, being visible, being polite, being courteous, being well-trained, using technology to make their actions transparent and understandable to the community, to school police and transit police, and working with other departments such as Temple University, Drexel, or University Penn Police. I want to integrate the police so that there is greater public safety coordination. That has to occur in public gathering places like schools, rec centers, like Center City, business area, tourist areas, public transportation, but in particular, those communities that have been crying out for law enforcement because of all the deadly violence. The arrival of police and the fact that they are engaged, communicating, and working with the community gives us a chance to intervene now by cleaning the streets, by taking care of those lots, by cleaning up those parks and making sure the recreation centers and libraries are available, accessible by changing their hours and what's in them as a way of showing people there is something different. Like, I understand that we're not going to stop this violence for a long period of time simply by having people in uniform show up. But people in uniform showing up is a sign that we're paying attention and we care. But very quickly, we have to back that up with clean community. Those are things that right away people can see. We're not allowing dumping. We're not allowing ATVs and dirt bikes to roar through the community. We are making sure that tractor trailers are not parked in front of people's homes. We're enforcing the quality of life laws so that people can come out and be safe in their communities. And one of the most important things we can do, and it is because a lot of this violence that we're talking about is actually stemming from quite young people. We have to immediately do things that show people we are reforming public education in a way that is bringing a equitable level of facilities, curriculum, and resources to schools that have never had them before. So I think policing is a way of showing that we care, that allows us to clean and beautify communities, that allows us to ensure that people have a better quality of life, and allows us the opportunity to put in certain types of better services, from public education, rec centers, community centers, to libraries, that show people, let's give them a chance. Let's give the city a chance, because we've lost faith in our city. We don't believe in our government, but let's give them a chance. They're trying to show us that they're going to make life better for us, and that's what I would do.
I have a question
Sure.
that has been bothering me for so long.
Now I'm glad I'm on
And
the show.
okay, let's talk about. Let's have this
Wow.
uncensored conversation.
Yes.
You spoke about being in the district attorney's office for a little while, and then as
Yes.
an elected official. In the 80s, crack hit the African American community by storm.
Yes.
The people who were selling crack got locked up. The people who was using crack got locked up. David, explain to me why it's different now for opioids. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that people
Understood.
who are addicted to drugs do not have a problem. I had
Right.
a brother. I have a brother, and he's clean now and has been clean for years. And he was on crack for a while. I'm not insensitive to that part.
Yes.
But we're speaking about something that's real, something that took the African community by storm.
Yeah.
But see, opioid affects Caucasians,
Right.
some African Americans.
Right.
And even with this gun violence, I'm speaking about something real.
Yes.
Why is it that it seems like the African American community comes up short most of the time when we're receiving services, when we're asking for help? It blows my mind now that there's so much education, there's so much training, there's so much money in opioid prevention. But it wasn't that way when crack took us by storm. David, we need someone who's going to level the playing field. Everyone should be treated equal. Can you speak to that?
Yes. So first of all, what you've noticed is true, that there's a great disparity in treatment with less services and more harsh treatment if you're Black than if you're white. I'm just saying that's a fact. That's true. And I'm going to go back a little bit in history so the listeners and viewers can understand this. I'm just giving a history. History is so important to understand like how things are. But I made my first statement because I'm not trying to say that it isn't true. It is true. But let's go back in history. And I will talk about what I witnessed along with what is there kind of in terms of studies and things like that. When I was in elementary school in the mid 60s, there was a heroin issue, but it was not in the polite and nice white community. It wasn't in the suburbs. It wasn't in wealthy communities. It was in the city. It was primarily with people who were kind of like the outskirts of society, be they white or be they Black or Hispanic. But heroin was a dirty drug being used by minorities and by hippies and people like that. And so there was a problem with heroin and some other drugs, especially coming off of the 60s. There's a lot of drug use, LSD and all sorts of drugs. And I would say that more money was put into dealing with educating children not to use drugs and dealing with drug addiction. I think in the 60s, there was more of an effort than there is today in prevention and education and things like that. So there was this problem, and the problem got resolved. Right, there was a lot of people doing drugs in the 1960s, and well, you know, that problem was gone by the 70s. You know, right after the 60s, we got into Earth Shoes, John Denver music, Elton John, and Jesus Christ. We had like a whole revival thing going on, right? So we had this interesting metamorphosis where the drugs kind of like there were drugs, but it was more like marijuana and things like that. And a lot of people weren't doing drugs. Then we got into kind of like the disco era, and then it was Coke. And Coke was the smart person's drug. It was the cool drug. You didn't get hooked on Coke, right? Cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, if you remember Miami Vice and those shows, there was a whole issue about cocaine and you know, its proliferation and how much money people were making. It was in all the nightclubs and all that type of thing. Crack comes along and it scares everyone because crack is like $5. And crack provides a instant high that is so intense and so short-lived that the crack addict is looking for $5, $5, $5, and the physical change that they go through is shocking. Like someone on crack for 9 months, they're missing hair, you know, their teeth are falling. There are all kind of issues with them. And so crack really scared people, and it was not in the white community. It was in the Black community. And people were watching, like normal people, all of a sudden become crack fiends. It was the word that was used. Like all of a sudden they lost their minds and they were constantly on that crack pipe. And so it was the Black community through their pastors and through educators and community leaders that wanted a crackdown on crack. It was that frightening. And they demanded and they received from the government what was considered the way to go was to exert such force in law enforcement that it
Mm,
would cause anyone and everyone related to crack to like, you won't do it because the punishments are so harsh. But that did not stop, the crack market. And so what
mhm,
happened is people who were users were being prosecuted as dealers. And there was just a whole effort. There were crack houses. We weren't having open air drug dealing. There were crack houses. You had to knock on the door. There was a big metal door. At the time, I think it was a lot of people who believed that you could law enforce your way into reducing the ill effects of crack. And the result was kind of an indiscriminate or a purposeful a punishment of addicted persons as being the example of what happens when you use crack. And so we had a lot of people that had lengthy, sentences because they were users, they were addicted. And that turned out to be a very questionable, if not a acknowledged failure in terms of policy. But crack did subside. And while crack is still around, it's not like what it used to be, because I will just say, we used to have prostitutes in Center City. And when crack came out, we had prostitutes in every neighborhood of this city. It was no longer like the Center City prostitute; it was the crack prostitutes in what used to be, mostly African American residential neighborhoods that used to have problems with crime, but they weren't littered with prostitutes. And now this was like infecting the whole neighborhood. Whatever it was, that's how that was handled. And then time goes by, and now there's the opioid issues, the opioid medications, but beyond that, there is an addiction, not by troubled people, but by really well-to-do, intelligent, and very successful people, including a lot of young people who are from wealthy communities and they're white. And they become tremendously addicted to heroin, and they show up in places like Philadelphia on Kensington Avenue, and they are overdosing. And now their parents have the wherewithal, the money, and everything to look at this problem differently. And how they look at it is that when their child dies of an overdose, they're thinking, what could I have done differently? And so now that they've lost their child, what they're thinking about is, well, what if we never tried to restrict our child's use? What if there were safe injection sites, as we're being told? A medical doctor or a medical person, they would go there, they would shoot up in front of this person, and if they were ODing, they'd save their lives, and that type of thing. So it sounds like, hey, that would have helped. My child might still be alive. And so they, being executives, doctors, professors, lawyers, they are exerting the power they have to advocate for enabling, which is what it is, enabling. And with the backing of reports and other things that say this is a really good thing. They also dedicate themselves to fundraising and foundations and a political power. And they want to have a different approach to dealing with drug addiction for their children and their children's friends and people who look like their children. And so they will say that what was done in the 1980s in dealing with crack was a failure, and that trying to let people hit rock bottom, and that's a failure. And what we should do is basically let them do drugs in an effort to save their lives every day until they voluntarily seek help. But what is noticeable is the very different attitude where crack addicts were looked at as like a pariah in the community. Heroin addicts are looked at as like innocent victims of this terrible drug.
Right.
And they've been painted quite differently with a lot of different efforts. And, you know, a lot of times when we talk about the person, like when we talk about that opioid heroin epidemic, we're looking at the user, the addicted person, as a victim. We are not thinking about the residents, the children in the neighborhoods. We're not thinking about the young people that are tempted into the life of drug dealing, who go to jail, who get shot, who get murdered, to supply this need. And I think there's a lot of focus only on like sympathy for the drug addicted person without understanding that while they're drug addicted, they're doing things to themselves that are very regretful, that will give them a lot of trauma, which they want to medicate even more. And so allowing them to be drug addicted, because most of them get their money through prostitution. And most of it is because they are really dependent on the drugs, and they find themselves in really bad situations and bad experiences. It's all, you know, to get tonight or tomorrow's dosage. It has been pretty much you know, a very different effort because it's bright, young, you know, smart, attractive, promising young white people versus Black people from the inner city.
If you become mayor,
Yeah.
what would you do to help those who are suffering from mental illness? Because we know those services have changed over the years. There are many people who are in need of help with mental illness. If they get 302, they'll come out in 72 hours. They're not getting the help that they need. But I think that whole system has failed over the years, where there's so many people who are suffering from mental illness. Their families cannot get the services that they need if this person does not agree to it. But what would you do to help those who are suffering from mental illness?
Well, that's a challenging issue. Here's what I would do. I generally look at the mental illness that we have to deal with in our city based on categories, right? So, for example, we have persons who have mental illness because of drug addiction, or maybe drug addiction because of mental illness. But anyway, their mental condition is tied to their drug abuse. That is one set of people. We have other people that are, I would say, like mentally ill for reasons that are medical, and they need a certain different type of level of treatment. In other words, while we have people who are drug addicted that have you know, mental conditions and emotional conditions and trauma and other behavioral health issues, we can reduce that when we reduce their drug addiction. The less they're on drugs, the more normal their life becomes, decision making, things like that. But there are some people it has nothing to do with drugs. They are in a different state altogether, and they may never recover from that. They would need psychiatric help. They would need medication. They would need like lifelong services, and that is, you know, a separate group of people. And then there are people who have really just the trauma of life. They're really not mentally ill. They're not a drug addicted. It's just life has been hard on them.
Mhm, mhm.
And yeah, it's like depression and sadness, and they're just overwhelmed with like what life has brought about. We've seen a lot of that since the pandemic, since this gun violence. We see a lot of anger. But
Mhm.
you know, how we deal with these people is that there's a way, you know, to receive them and to help them, and they have a promise of getting better. When I say getting better, I mean to put life into perspective. to get a level of self motivation, to see a purpose in life, to live a good quality of life, to interface with other people, and to not need assistance in living. They're able to get a job, get back with their family, have a family, those type of things. So those to me, at least three different levels of care and what each one demands. I think the problem that we face as a city is a shortage of funding, a shortage of professionals, and a bureaucracy that needs to be reformed. And because it's not efficient and it's not handling, these different categories of people with mental health needs in a way that is appropriate. And part of it, I'm going to say, is because of the funding mechanisms. When a system becomes overwhelmed, as it is now, there's a point where it doesn't have the capacity. I'd say Kensington Avenue with drug addiction, because over 50% of the people on Kensington Avenue are not from Philadelphia. They're coming to Kensington Avenue because it is a place where they could do anything they want. And so they're leaving behind in Chester County or Bucks County or wherever they're from, they're leaving behind the county health services, detox, mental behavioral health services. They're leaving that behind, as well as a support network of loved ones and family and things like that. So they're coming to the worst possible place. And here in Philadelphia, we don't have the wherewithal to help them. There's too many of them. And so, the same thing with Kensington as with the kind of mental health needs. We have to deal with the volume. I'm from Southwest Philadelphia. I understand Southwest Philadelphia. I'm not from the main line. I don't really understand the main line. And so if people on the main line are ending up in Philadelphia, the main line is not doing what it needs to do to take care of the drug addiction problems that it has, because that's their folks. They know best about who these are, the fathers, the mothers, the brothers, the sisters, the children. They know who they are, and they're not providing, the services necessary, because they're just really happy they're being sent to Philadelphia and they don't have to deal with this problem. Maybe that's unfair to say.
Right. So in closing, I keep hearing that Philadelphia is a Democrat city. Philadelphia is a Democrat city. So for November 7th, real quick, what would you have the voters know about Philly being a Democrat city for this mayor election coming up? Real quick.
Sure. Philadelphia is a Democratic city. It's got a lot of Democrats in it. And I believe that each person who's a Democrat is a Democrat for a specific reason. They want social justice, they want equity, they want fairness, they want compassion. But I would just challenge everyone to look around your neighborhood and tell me that if you see that, because we've not had that in decades. And I, as a Republican, am very much about the law. And I'm going to enforce the laws that require equity in education in terms of facility, curriculum, equal opportunity when it comes to EOPs, which are equal opportunity plans, when it comes to construction, building, jobs. I'm going to enforce those laws. I'm going to make neighborhoods safe, because we won't have good education if we don't have safe neighborhoods. And I believe that one of the reasons why the resources don't get to where they're supposed to go is because we have an entrenched political machine and organization that is no longer listening to people. They have a supreme confidence that they have the power, and that as long as politicians go through them, they will be elected, and they don't have ears for the people. We need a wholesale change in this city, and we need to get the attention of the political machines to understand that it's the people, the voters, that you serve, and not the other way around.
November 7th, please get out and vote. And I ask you to look at each candidate. Peace and love.